Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, feminist and literary perspective. I'm your host Joel, and joining me as always is my cozy co-host
Brian. Hi.
Hi Brian. Every single time I can see you, the panic in your eyes as you remember you have to say your name.
Yeah, I wasn't close enough to the mic there, so it looks like I was just like, a million miles away. Oh crap.
You're racing onto the scene. So this week on Buffy Boys we are discussing season 3 episode 12, Helpless. And Brian, do you want to kick us off with that Buffy and summary?
Yeah, okay. So this is Helpless, season 3 episode 12. As you already said, it was first aired on January 19th, 1999. It was written by David Fury, who previously wrote Go Fish and will write loads of other shit. And directed by James A. Contner, who has previously directed 3 different episodes. I think he has a couple more to direct yet. So, here is your Buffy Ann summary. After meditation sessions with Giles, Buffy finds her powers weakening. He is putting her through a test ordered by the council where she has to defeat a vampire by intelligence. The vampire turns his council minders and abducts Joyce. Turns his council. Buffy tricks and kills him, passing the test, but council boss Quentin sacks Giles for caring too much.
I'd love to say that in the next interview I have from let go from a job, I was sacked for just caring too much.
Joel is very likely how you will go, be kicked out of a job at
this
some point.
Is true. And that's why I was topless on the roof with a megaphone. So
what's the reference there? I don't get it.
Just a joke. Sometimes I say things that just aren't quotes from popular media.
Oh, you see, it wasn't funny. So
there you go. So Brian, what interesting thing have you done this week which you're going to bring fire to this bronze banter segment with?
We got a cast iron skillet. Yeah.
We did get a cast iron skillet. We have moved into that phase.
I seasoned it today. I had to scrub it, and I put loads of oil in it, and then I baked the oil in.
We've molted into that phase of gay death.
Did you know that if you use a cast iron fillet, depending on
it's a skillet, it's not a fillet.
But I said skillet.
You said fillet.
We can listen back to the audio.
Okay, roll back the tapes.
But apparently, depending on the dish, the amount of iron in the food you're eating can go up from anything between 28% to 980%.
Right, that's a lot of iron.
Yeah, so if you're doing like a pasta dish with loads of water in it, apparently it just like soaks up all the like literal iron in the thing, and it's really good for you. Great,
that's good for your...
If you're anemic, then like cast iron skillet's the way to go.
You're blood in your bones. Why have we gotten a cast iron skillet? Let's admit.
It's because we've been watching a lot of Bon Appetit Test Kitchen.
So Bon Appetit test. I'm going to try that one again. Bon Appetit Test Kitchen. It's a hard one to say.
Yeah.
The gays love it.
Well, no, the gays love one specific person. They love Claire, and they would die for Claire from Bon Appetit Test Kitchen.
But we've been late on this. We've been sleeping on this a little bit. We've been waiting for an in.
Yeah, I think so.
And dear listener, it is delightful. So Brian, what would you say is what's the elevator pitch for Test Kitchen for Bon Appetit?
So it's basically just the Bon Appetit magazine in America. It's just a cooking magazine, but they have a YouTube channel. And it kind of came to prominence because they have quite a few like very personality-driven cooking shows on it somehow. And they kind of just like looked into this. So there are 2 people who we love in it. There's Brad Leone, who does like all sorts of weird fermentation shit, but he kind of talks like me. He can't really talk, which is really nice. And the other person who everyone loves forever and ever, and we stan a cooking queen. It's Claire Saffitz, who is this lady with these beautiful grey streaks in her hair, who's only 33, who
very charming.
Basically remakes popular confectionery items, but like in a kitchen. So this week she made Mentos.
And made them gourmet, essentially.
Gourmet Mentos. Yeah. And the idea of what she's doing for the week kind of depends on what approach she takes. Sometimes she's trying to make a gourmet version of it, and sometimes she's trying to replicate it in the kitchen.
Depends how well she's doing.
Exactly. So yeah, and she's just wonderful. She's thoughtful. She's nice. She's funny. She's kind. She smiles. She has beautiful big blue like olive eyes. Almond eyes. She's wonderful. But yeah, go watch it if you like to be happy.
It's just endearing because obviously what they have looked into is the sincerity to it, and people are so inured now to like fake reality TV shows and overproduce things, and trying someone who really cares about making things well and sometimes fails and gets really frustrated and cries and goes home and comes back and says, no, I'm going to do it today, is I think really, really relatable. But yeah, we're not the first people to discover it, but we highly recommend it if you haven't popped it on. What's our favorite episode so far? Was it
my favorite has been M&M's, because she got so frustrated and they came up with such stupid solutions to it, and it was, I don't know, it just seemed like good fun.
It turns out that a lot of food we like is actually incredibly complex.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's just like every food we eat that's like mass produced is just machined to death, so it's almost impossible to recreate.
Yeah,
except for Kendall's mint cake. I made Kendall's mint cake at home one time. It was great. Kendall's mint cake is that thing that the first expedition. It was the first Everest expedition. Brought Kendall's mint cake with them. They fucking loved it because basically it's just a big slab of sugar and peppermint flavoring.
Oh, and this is something you like.
I love it. I made it myself.
Okay, so we want to get into Helpless.
Yeah, we should do. We should also mention very briefly that the other thing we did this week was we published Slayerfest 98, the episode that we did with Ian, which is really good fun.
We did. It was a lot of fun. We are podcasting people who do
collaborations. We call them collabs.
Collabs, yeah. We have a tete-a-tete and we tic-tac on what our collabs are going to be, what we can sing our joys about. But no, it was a lot of fun. I recommend that you listen to it. If you're an incredibly specific demographic of our friends and family who listen to this, then it might mean you know this Buffy podcast and not Slayerfest 98.
Yeah, but most people would know Slayerfest 98 first and foremost.
Yeah, they're cool. But I think it was an interesting experience because I think our experience of doing the show from a very specifically Irish perspective and all the various weirdness we have in terms of the 90s and in terms of imported American culture, and us talking about things like recess but not actually having it here or really knowing what it is, or the SATs. We all had feelings about SATs from like Saved by the Bell and Buffy, but we didn't understand what it meant. And then with someone who is much kind of closer to that source and is kind of relates more specifically to their experience, is interesting. I had a lot of fun, so go check it out. Go follow Slayerfest 98. This has been a free promo.
And just, it's very important to note, Ian Carlos Crawford, the most hosty of the show. The host of the show. Sweetheart, he was so nice. I mean, like, you know, we absolutely do not justify with the amount of listenership that we have, his attention in that situation is really good of him. So yeah, thanks, Ian.
Yeah, shout out to Ian Carlos Crawford.
Yeah, good job, Ian. Thank you. Okay, Helpless.
I love this episode.
Yeah, I know.
I'm gonna bring strong energy to this. I might
just step back and you can just go.
I might bring slightly chaotic energy to this because I was talking to my I was quite giddy today all day.
Oh, is that why you weren't in touch with me at all?
Yeah, I was just laughing at my own jokes a lot, and I'm going to talk around this rather than quoting it specifically because I might start laughing again. But I did have a conversation with my colleague where I accidentally referred to something as clams instead of claims, and I was just doubled over laughing at my own joke, and they were very concerned when I told them that I was about to record a podcast and that maybe I might need to take a break. So we'll see what kind of improvisation I bring to this. But no, this is a great episode. Love it. So this is the one where Buffy turns 18. It's her birthday. Birthdays are always terrible, particularly for Buffy. We have a lot of use of the word daggy in this episode and just general daggy issues. And we have this genuinely horrific scenario where if a Slayer reaches the age of 18, the Watchers Council puts them through this trial called the Cruciamentium, which is designed to test them to prove that they can be a Slayer without their Slayer superpowers, and puts her in this scenario where she's being hunted by a vampire who, aside from a very vicious vampire, is also a woman hating serial killer. And Giles betrays her to put her in this situation. It is chef's kiss. It is just ripe with thematic stuff, with horror imagery, with strong characterization. I love it. I just really enjoy it. I thought that the stuff around it as well, in terms of, you know, Cordelia's there and being funny. All of the Scoobies are kind of ancillary to this. Joyce has some good moments, and obviously we get the head of the council appears, Quentin Travers, who is more Giles than Giles, more British than British, and it kind of sets up this juxtaposition. So yeah, I think that's a lot going for it. What did you think of the episode?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Not as much as that, to be honest. But I liked it a lot.
You're okay. You can be wrong. It's fine.
Yeah, it's cool. So yeah, I don't know about the episode structurally. I think it was drawn out at points. I think it kind of stretched a little bit thin at points. I think it like lingered on various different things too long. I thought the chase sequence through the house was like it needed to be one step shorter, if you get me. It felt like there were just way too many like, you know, pregnant moments in it. The tension kind of dissipated for me a little bit. But I do like all the stuff around it. I think the one thing I really want to talk about, I'm really fascinated to hear your thoughts on anyway, is just like Giles. And, you know, is this Giles being, you know, like legitimately in a difficult position, or has he just done like the bad thing, you know? And we can talk about that in a minute, obviously. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Cruciamentium, of course, from the Latin crucia, which is torture. You might know it from the Cruciatus curse, is that what it's called?
I'm sure other people have more specific pronunciations, but the torturing spell from Harry Potter.
Exactly. Crucio.
Crucio, etc. So it's very much linking into that. So the themes on this episode are strong and on the surface, and that's no bad thing. You know?
There's we will talk about it later, but there's like a Little Red Riding Hood references here, but that, you know, when they get introduced, seem like there might be like, you know, a nod and then actually become textual. Yeah,
exactly. And I think including this Latin phrasing is very much, we have a situation where the energy of here's the patriarchy, here's a very male dominated, very imperial, very British hierarchical structure with its traditions and its private school affectations.
Funny that you bring up language, because like, you know, that's a very good point in the sense that both language is very important in this episode, because Quentin Travers specifically represents like that British kind of way of speaking, which, you know, Giles does kind of get around at one point by saying he doesn't give a rat's arse, and, you know, so it's like, you know, slang but British, whereas Quentin Travers very much represents that patriarchal, heavily structured language, and yeah, the use of Latin, indicating a kind of certainly a bit of a religious element to it as well. But then, and Buffy, of course, in this episode, really, again, once she becomes depowered, losing her language.
So it's incredibly pronounced in this, and it makes a specific point where they have created a situation through her being depowered through this injection that Giles gives her, that she is stripped of some of the support structure she has as a Slayer to become a heightened version of this kind of feminist hero, and she's put in a situation which she's not incapable of dealing with, but she's unfamiliar with, which is being much more vulnerable to the various pressures and misogynies and toxic masculinity in the world. And in doing so, you're absolutely correct, she loses her sense of playfulness, the language, everything we said before, that the fact that she can pun and be creative with language. Incidentally, actually, I want to throw this in there. Apparently, Buffy invented the word sitch, as in situation. Because it's almost like that thing with Shakespeare where you're trying to figure out, have I heard this word before? This was in this text, but apparently Joss Whedon used to say it in college and just wrote it into the show. Anyway, everything she does that gets around the master and all this kind of stuff has always been about her being irreverent. And then she loses the ability to do this. The first example being that when she is fighting the vamp in one of the opening scenes, when she first starts to waver in her power, she's initially quite punning about it, and then she loses her confidence, and the vampire very symbolically takes her stake from her, turns to stake her, and says to her, "You'll tell me if I'm doing this wrong, won't you?" And he kind of takes that power away from her.
And specifically, like, you know, referring to some sexual assault there. I mean, like, you know, which is kind of horrifying as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's horrifying in its essence. I don't think that metaphor is inexpertly used in this episode, because it is very specifically, you know, there's an intentionality there. There's the sense of sexual assault from vampires. There's the fact that later Cordelia is being roughed up by a guy who is trying to force her to date him, and Buffy can't defend her, and she gets thrown on the ground by this guy. And obviously that the vampire that she's set against is a serial killer who specifically murdered and tortured 12 women, we're told. So there's a specific opposition being set up here. But there's that sense, and then there's the sense that when she comes into the house, she is voiceless almost the entire time that she is in the boarding house trying to save her mother and trying to defeat Zachary Kralik, who's a vampire, she says almost nothing until she wins. So it's very pointed, I think.
I think it's also very important to note that like one of the things this episode is trying to suggest is that like there's lots of identity issues in this episode. Obviously, we'll get into that in a little bit maybe, but Buffy kind of at some point in this episode kind of realizes that the power that she has isn't because of the Slayer force, as in of course it is, but like that's not all that she has to offer, because it's not when her physical power is returned that she's able to pun again, because she puns very immediately after the guy kills her. Sorry, she kills the guy the other way around, which indicates that like she has become she's regained her identity not through regaining her physical power, but by regaining her internal power.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the things what I think is fascinating about this and how they construct this, you know, this opposition between the feminist themes of Buffy and the patriarchal, antonym to that, is that this is one of the first really solid presentations of the Watchers Council. It's always been there kind of lore-wise in the background. There's a couple of examples. One fake Watcher came along, but in this episode we have introduced the structure, we have the tradition, we have Giles being deferential to Quentin Travers, we have a head of the council, we have assistants, etc. And already it's been shown to be outdated in this first instance. Because what Quentin says is the tradition that's been there for a dozen centuries is to teach the Slayer and establish that she has strength beyond her physical power. Buffy has already done that.
Yep.
Buffy's already done that with Angel and with so many other examples where the council has already fallen behind where the Slayer is.
Importantly, she did blow up the judge with the bazooka.
She did blow up the judge with bazooka, so she's, she knows what she's doing here.
Though in fairness, it probably has quite a lot of kickback.
True. So she had a wide stance. Buffy has a good wide stance.
I think that it's very important to note here that it's not that it's very likely that is the rule. That is why the Watchers Council does impose this test onto people, is to test them to make sure that they are able to do things without their powers that they have gained. All those things. More importantly, it is specifically an attempt to control the Slayer, to frighten them, to whip them into submission a little bit, to show them that they can take the power away if they need to. And like, what a more patriarchal story is there than that? Like, threatening women to show that they need your protection, essentially.
Yeah, and it's a highly contrived and constructed control they have over the Slayer, and it is predicated around keeping them uninformed to a certain degree, kind of drip feeding information about what the Slayer is and what they do through the Watchers. You could easily have there's nothing preventing potentials being trained together. It could be beneficial in a number of ways, as we see in season 7.
Except that they don't want the women,
but they keep them separated. And there's a sense of an increasing distance and atrophy of this structure, because at one point Giles says something very interesting, I think, in terms of lore, which he says that if any of the council still had contact with the Slayer, they would understand that this isn't just a business, which suggests that they've gotten more and more distant from what they were doing, or that there's been some kind of, because there's often a suggestion in these earlier seasons that there are just other Slayers and Watchers or things about to happen out there rather than the single one. It actually reminded me of a kind of interesting note in one of the Buffy comics, Frey, the one that's set in the 23rd century, where it's been 200 years since there's been any Slayers, basically, and there's one Slayer is called again, and she finds her Watcher, but by this point he's turning into a complete zealot, because they've been holding this tradition of Slayers and there hasn't been one for 300 years, and when he finds her, he basically immolates himself, or burns himself to death in kind of frenzied reverie. And I can see this line of projection from where the council is now. So yeah, I just think it's very interesting on that front. But just like, this kind of sense of, Quentin refers to Buffy as a colorful girl because she says "bite me" at the end of the episode, and it's very much about infantilizing and controlling the Slayer. The very, very fact that they put this on women who are approaching an age of maturity, an age of majority, of sexual
sexual ability, I want to say, just because there's all the context of Buffy and Angel being so horny at the beginning of the episode. So I do think there's a sexual control element there too.
Yeah, because it's specific, and just to put that in context, the opening of the episode is Angel and Buffy wrestling, and there's a lot of sexual tension there. She makes a very startling, uncomfortable joke about meeting her father for her birthday, but he thinks that she's going on a date, so he says, "Oh, I'm meeting an older man, very handsome, likes me to call him Daddy."
Yeah.
But yeah, so that whole kind of that element of femininity and that element of control is definitely there. Quentin refers to Buffy a number of times to Giles as a child. Mm-hmm. So the council does not see these Slayers as women. Mm-hmm. It sees them as children, or at the best, young girls.
Very, very much contrasted by the fact that, the context within the other characters of the episode is to view Buffy as having met a threshold. Mm-hmm. Willow says that she could be drafted. And kind of Joyce is quite happy for her, all this stuff. So the fact that Quentin specifically views her as a child is it's very indicative.
What the cruciumentium does, and what it's implied to do for Slayers who fail the test, is they die. Mm-hmm. So you
weed them out.
You're weeding them out, but you're also creating the system where you're not getting Slayers in many ways who are getting to be 25, 30, experienced, independent. You're constantly keeping them in this dependent state of being 15 to 18. Mm-hmm. It's horrific. What it implies in terms of what the council does, even in this early outing for the council, is really, really upsetting.
Yeah, it's really not good. I mean, that is the origin though of the Watchers Council, is that they made the Slayer, and it was through enslavement and just sexual aggression.
Yeah, so, and what chains up the first Slayer and forces a demon into her to turn her into a weapon.
It's not great stuff.
No. But that being said, in terms of a story, and in terms of an episode, I enjoy it, and I enjoy the strength it allows Buffy to display. I think Sarah Michelle Gellar's performance, I always think she's a star. She's a star, but she really got range in this episode, where she got to show a lot of vulnerability, which just by virtue of her character she doesn't really get to do very often. She shows again how she can be vulnerable and young while not being a child. She definitely has that maturity there of someone who has lived through and survived a lot, which is, I think, something that's very resonant for a lot of people.
I think we also have to note that her physicality work in this episode is stunning, in the sense that she goes from being a physically very able, strong person, visually very clearly that, and after that, she is so careful with herself, physically through the rest of the episode. Just in terms of her physicality and her acting, she seems frail, which is
fragile.
Just yes, that's another word for the thing I just said. Thank you.
I'm assenting. I'm agreeing.
And it's a really good job. Yeah. Other incredible performance in this episode has to go to Giles. He's the best.
He's the best in when he's just a supporting character in episode, but this is front and center, and it puts him in a very unusual circumstance. And I think on top of this, before Buffy, Giles has had so many opportunities in previous episodes, depending on the writing or the circumstance, to be mean or to be skeptical or to let Buffy down, and he never ever has. And I think it is holding his punch for this episode, where he does specifically, and we can debate now whether or not he actually does objectively, but she certainly feels betrayed by it. Mm-hmm. He does something which is directly against her well-being, and suffers for it emotionally, and is in a very odd position, essentially supplicatingly asking Buffy for forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And I think portrays that very well in the various overlapping relationships they have of a mentor and ward, and of father and daughter figure, friends, peers, equal combatants, that kind of thing. So
yeah. So is your read of the episode that really there's a really horrific scene basically? I think it was probably just before the first ad break, probably, if you watched this originally. I don't remember if there was a cut to black at that point, but where Giles hypnotizes Buffy
shortly after she was wanking a crystal.
She is wanking a crystal. He hypnotizes her and then injects her with a serum, which is the thing that's weakening her. And kind of, if you're watching this as a viewer for the first time, you're like, oh, Giles is the bad guy of this episode, but you're like, oh, this must be a bait and switch kind of thing. You would be of the opinion that there was no switch.
Yeah, I think that it's a very interesting note to add to the character. It really shows that Giles is under a lot of pressure in this role. It shows something that's important to understand, which is Giles is a person. And we've seen that before with the Mark of Igon and with Jenny and with all that kind of stuff. But he did, I feel that it's very much in his character that he wasn't initially intended to be a watcher, or that wasn't what he wanted to do, and he's kind of ended up in this role. So he has a certain amount of agency there.
Was he going to be a postman?
I think he might have wanted to be a postman and then maybe a fighter pilot, but he was obviously born into this watcher tradition and tried to rebel against it. But at the end of the day, he didn't have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens to him after this? He loses his job, but he's fine. They're not going to take him out back and shoot him, or at least that's not the immediate impression that we get. But he has also been conditioned. And I suppose there's a comment here to make if we're being generous about how men are also affected by these patriarchal and toxic,
which of course they are.
Yeah, which they definitely are, by these toxic traditions. But Buffy wouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
If the situation was reversed, and that's why that's why Buffy's always our hero, because she doesn't have the capacity, or not that she doesn't have the capacity, but she always has the strength to choose not to do this. And he makes a mistake. He makes a serious mistake that could have gotten her and Joyce killed, and I think that's part of his character.
Yeah, removing the agency of an 18-year-old as a fully grown adult, and someone who specifically puts herself in extremely dangerous situations because of the sense of duty she feels. Yeah, it's a deeply wrong thing to do. You're right.
Yeah, there's just no justifying it, and particularly since he has come to such a strong understanding of who Buffy is, and I think this really cements for him that Buffy is special, and not in terms of her being preternaturally chosen, but just that she's a very strong individual. And I think he already knows that what the council is doing is wrong to a certain degree. But to his credit, Giles has always been one throughout the series so far for rushing in when he's likely to get killed to try and save her. And the first opportunity he has, he really rows back on this and burns all of his bridges with the council and goes and saves her. And I do appreciate that, but I think he really fucks up here. Yeah. But is there a character on this show who doesn't do something that needs forgiveness at some point?
I don't think Xander does anything at any point.
Oh, Xander is.
Yeah, true. So one of the nice moments in the episode was where Giles comes into the boarding house where they're keeping what's his name?
Zachary Kralik. We're keeping
Kralik, and he realizes that something has gone wrong here. So he just smashes through banisters to grip some wood to create a stake, and it was very I was like, oh, that's what my sexuality is. That's interesting.
Yeah. But it's a strong thing with him. He's a very direct actor, which is something that when Wesley is introduced shortly, he just isn't, and it's something that he has to grow towards. But again, it's we talk about Buffy being a great Slayer, but Giles is a very unique and successful watcher to be able to train such an unusual person to her strength. And it's because when he needs to, he just will, and he does stake the vampire in the end. Not Kralik, but one of the council minions who gets hench persons that gets turned, who incidentally was in an episode, or was in all episodes of Star Trek Enterprise, which we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, apparently so.
Mr. Reed, a character who was with Star Trek's dubious record on sexuality up until Discovery, was always meant to be gay, and that was implied, and then later on was really aggressively shown to not be gay, to roll that back.
Well, thank God for that. Do you know who what Kralik also did?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, he was also Rack in season 6 of Buffy. So he's the one who gives Willow the drugs.
Yeah, the kind of the weird hippie cocaine dealer kind of guy.
He's Jeff Kober, and he's been in basically everything. He was in Supernatural a bunch. He was in Walking Dead a bunch. You can see why he's such clear, villain face.
That was makeup.
Oh.
So I have a question to ask you, Brian.
Go for it.
What do you feel about this episode in terms of the parental elements of it?
Sure.
Hank, Summers, Giles, Joyce Summers, all that in there.
It's definitely a double-edged sword there. So I'm not sure if I want to read too much into the maternal aspects of this. I think they're pretty boilerplate, even though Kralik does highlight it so aggressively. At the same time, he kind of only goes after Joyce because of his mother issues, which he acknowledges.
It's just to drop the note there that men like this often act like this and blame women for it, for completely unsubstantiated reasons. I think
it's the absolute lack of sophistication that's like that bigots take. Is they view the action, they view one person's actions as representing all of the people of that ilk
category.
Yeah. So I mean, like, his mother potentially castrated him with scissors.
Yeah, ambiguous. Yeah.
And was like, it's suggested as being like sexually promiscuous and stuff. So he is punishing all women because of this. And that's kind of as far as I really kind of care to go about maternity stuff. Though,
well, actually, that's what I think that's actually quite relevant, as in the sense of, with so many kind of aggressive, violent men and serial killers in the real world, often their justifications are like really boring and not original. And, that's part of it. They have this sense of it being. They
remember being laughed at as a child.
Yeah, which I think is appropriate.
Because, well, let's be real. There's no great reason to go out and be a serial killer. There's just isn't.
Let's just make that our position paper.
Yeah, that is the Buffy Boys position. So I will look at the maternal relation there when we go to talk about fairy tales, which I would like to talk about in a minute.
Sure.
But fatherhood. Fuck. So there's obviously Hank Summers in this episode has written Buffy a Dear Buffy letter to break up with her as a child, because his projections for the year have gone all wonko, so he can't go to do her birthday tradition, which is to go to see an ice show with her, which is just so sad.
Yeah. And this is very much the start, I think, of an estrangement between her and Hank,
which I think was already had the notes laid there beforehand. So it's just very sad to see it actually borne out. What I will say is, actually, if we are going back to maternity, is Joyce, of course, being the absolute class act that she is, immediately offers to take Buffy to the ice show instead.
Oh yeah,
which is so sweet. But in all aspects, father figures fail Buffy in this episode. On every level, there's the actual father figure fails her, the metaphorical father figure fails her. In Giles, he should be protecting her, and he does the opposite. And then the symbolic father figure fails her as well, which is the patriarchy and the Watchers Council. The structure that's supposed to be taking care of the Slayers fails the Slayer. So I mean, yeah,
I think Quentin, you can almost say, is a grandfatherly figure in the sense of his mistakes are being impressioned on Giles, who's passing him down. But I think Daddy Angel does right by her.
Daddy Angel does pretty okay. He does get her a book of poems by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. The book of poems, I haven't read anything by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, I don't think. But
fake fan.
I know, yeah. But apparently this book was specifically a book of poetry she wrote for her husband to be. And it's all love poems, so that's kind of nice and cute. Did you know that the guy who plays Travers K, his name is Harris Yulin, and he was in the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt a bunch.
Really?
Yeah, so he's still acting. So well done him.
What I will say, because it's going to be
83 now.
Oh wow, It's going to be a long time till we get to this episode. So I will say it now, because it is one of my favourite scenes in Buffy, and probably one of my favourite scenes of season 7, which is not a strong season overall. But Quentin finally saying, we finally figured it out. Buffy was right all along. We really should just get our shit together and get behind her. Let's go to war. And then the entire Watchers Council exploding. It's just it's really indelibly like such a Joss Whedon moment for me. And I actually, I like, in all sincerity, kind of like taught me a little bit about storytelling, in the sense of like, sometimes just go the other direction with it. And I really enjoy it, because it's a real like triumphant hero moment kind of thing.
Yeah. Fairy tales. So in this episode, Buffy is wearing a red hooded cloak. Very clearly supposed to be
as you do, as everyone has.
Yeah, sure. Little Red Riding Hood. We should. Did you watch the movie Hard Candy with Ellen Page?
I didn't, but I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, but she wears a red hood and that, and she's basically like, she tortures a child rapist for hours. Anyway, so who's played by Patrick Wilson. Yes, there you go. But
he's in a lot of stuff about weird stuff like that.
He's a bit of a freak, I think.
Yeah. He looks like a mannequin.
He does look like a mannequin, and he actually there is a mannequin of him in Angels in America, so that's interesting. But she's wearing a Little Red Riding Hood cloak when she gets to the house. Kralik is all like saying all sorts of stuff like, oh, you followed me through the woods into my place,
and my big bad teeth, etc.
And I came to you came to save grandmother, etc. So what I was reading, though, apparently one of the original versions of Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf convinces the girl, or like manages to lay out stuff for the girl so that she actually eats her grandmother.
Oh, right, interesting.
So that line where he says like the first thing that I'm going to turn Buffy into a vampire, and the first thing she sees when she wakes up will be, first thing she does when she wakes up will be to eat your face.
To Joyce.
This to Joyce. There's a little bit of that kind of auto-cannibalism there, which is very interesting.
That's a quite upsetting note. Can I throw something in there for you as well?
Yeah, please.
One of the earlier variations of the tale as well has them killing the wolf by tricking him into eating stones.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and what this ends with him.
That's what I know.
This ends with him being forced to eat something unexpected and burning him from the inside out. So I think that is probably intentional. Yeah,
sure. And just once again using fairy tales as a structure to great effect, but not quite doing the inversion that Joss Whedon does like to do or usually. So Gingerbread, obviously there was the inversion of the witch children kind of thing, and etc.
What about this boarding house in terms of a horror set?
Straight out of a fucking horror movie.
Yeah.
At one point Buffy's running through the house and she opens up a door and just hides in it, and she turns on the light and the camera spinning around her aggressively with stringed instruments going like and the room is covered in Polaroids of Joyce tied up and gagged.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating.
It must be a seven reference.
Yeah, I think so, because they're trying to. I think people underestimate,
or as I like to refer to it, it's a seven.
What I think people underestimate is that how much cinematography and sound and style influences them when they watch things. I think the average person can have a tendency to be like, oh, well, everything's just everything. Do you know what I mean? But as soon as she's depowered, she's casting this very archetypal final girl role, where she's in the haunted house, the lighting is much dimmer, there's these close corridors. It could be from a cabin in the woods kind of thing.
She's chased.
She goes into this room, and before she turns on the pole light, there's a good 5 seconds of darkness. This is
just the amount of darkness in the episode is significant, because they are shooting on 35mm by this point, so the quality of the light tends to be much better by this point in the series. But there's a lot of darkness in this episode. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So I think, and that makes us feel she's vulnerable, and you look how she holds herself, and she also goes to the boarding house dressed in dungarees and just looking notably more
childish,
more Dawn-like actually. And all that contribute. And there's this fantastic shot which you pointed out, which is one of the Watcher helpers who is murdered and is eaten. They go into the kitchen where his body's been left a couple of times, but you never see his face. You can see his bloody mangled arm on the table, and
we know something horrific has happened because Buffy and Giles both react like, Jesus, what the fuck.
Giles goes outside and nearly gets sick. So it's just all of that contributes just a very our point of view travels with Buffy in this episode.
I think it's actually it's an interesting one. I think it's one of the first times they've tried on a genre for an episode. So that kind of like tonal shift, significant tonal shift, is very unusual for Buffy. We'll see it again, obviously, in Once More Feeling very clearly, and we'll see it also with the body. So that kind of meta-narrativistic tonal shift it's very interesting. I think this is, I'm putting on my Joyce glasses, but I think this is one of the...
Joyce doesn't wear glasses.
He specifically does.
Joyce Summers, friend.
Oh yeah, that person. That James Joyce was like super fucking blind.
Really?
Yeah. So there's I won't go into. I was going to tell you all about how Stephen.
That could be your Patreon episode.
Stephen Dedalus, spends the whole of Ulysses without his glasses, and that's why he keeps describing things as blurry.
And also Restless obviously just throws in about 6 different genres in that episode.
Sure does. But yeah, so it's one of the first instances of that kind of stretching its limbs into other genres. I was going to say something about like existential issues. I think they're pretty clear here. I think it's the text. Buffy specifically actively takes on the identity of Slayer and doesn't know what to do, who to be if she's not the Slayer. So it's like, an integration of the full self, whereby if you take one of the elements away, the person does become vulnerable. And and you're taking away their identity. So that's great in the sense that, like, there was so much struggle over seasons 1 and 2 of Buffy wanting to reject the Slayer identity, and that becoming a metaphor for adulthood and etc. Whereas this episode, where she actually actively becomes an adult, she very aggressively identifies as the Slayer.
Buffy chooses to be chosen.
Good point.
I wrote that down.
Joe was in this thing for the whole time I was talking there, where he was like basically leaning up and raising his eyebrow at me, where he was like about to show me that he has a funny thing to say. Anyway, are you happy to do some end our patrol? Sorry, and what's the other thing? It's been so long since we did this. Dusting.
I appreciate your commitment to the.
That's Dust for Prince.
Yeah. Dust for Prince. Dust also having a big presence in his Dark Materials, which we're watching at the moment.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that when the series ends. Actually, that's what season ends, because it's definitely one of my main texts personally.
Sure. Yeah. Let's move into good dusting. How do we do that? I don't remember.
Do you want some Buffy bits?
Do you want to hit me with some Buffy bits?
Yeah, sure.
Buffy bits.
So this is the only time that Buffy celebrates a birthday without Spike being present.
All right.
Which is interesting. So apparently the original intention for this episode was that Buffy was going to be drugged. Did you read this? Buffy was going to be drugged, and she was going to hallucinate that all her friends and family had turned into vampires.
Oh, right, yeah.
But Joss Whedon actually nixed it because it was too similar in plot to and visual to The Wish. Exactly.
It's also like, it sounds a little hokey.
It's so funny. Exactly what I was thinking. It just feels like, when you feel like you brush another timeline momentarily, and felt like what could have been, and it's like that would have been bad.
I have this image of a text. I have this memory of a text where someone's staying somewhere in a hotel or something, and it turns out everybody is a vampire. And I don't know what it is, but I didn't like that either. It scared me.
This is the only time that a vampire is killed just by holy water. So that's interesting.
It's good to know it works.
Yeah. I this is how I know this, but like actually I think I might have only mentioned this to you during the watching, but Willow says that Buffy can be drafted. Women can't be drafted. So, but I read that on a very actually kind of note on IMDb, which I love the actually. We should have a section just for like actually. Yeah.
But that's the thing, like those notes are, the person in the universe doesn't have to be right. Yeah.
Oh, and actually one of the notes, I think it might have been on IMDb. It might have been Wikipedia or the Buffy Wikipedia either. But someone noted that they think that this episode is a large homage to Don't Look Now, which is the 70s horror movie with Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie, which is a stunning horror movie. If you haven't gotten around to watching, like, if you watch one 70s horror movie, you should probably watch Alien. But if you don't watch Alien, you should watch this. But it's about a couple who lose a child, and basically their relationship is tested. And people are like, oh yeah, this is clearly like a reference to this. And it's like, oh no, it's not. It just genuinely is not a reference to Don't Look Now. That's a stretch. Oh yeah, and last note, vampires aren't supposed to show up in photos, but Kralik does here. You said that's not the case, but they actually do reference it in the show.
Well, I'm shooting from the hip here, but I think specifically one of the plot points in Angel is when they flash back to the episode of him in the 50s. It's because one of the team finds a photo of him in the 50s, and I was like, I wonder why you were here. So
okay,
maybe it's inconsistent, but I don't doubt that you're
Buffy
right.
would never be inconsistent.
Yeah, I know, right?
It won't be worth watching if it was inconsistent. So
maybe Polaroids specifically can take photos of vampires.
Do you have any fashion notes for me today, Joe?
I do. The bad fashion in this episode. I feel like that's the Watchers' assistants dressed badly, but they just were really English and sounded badly, and so that makes me think they looked badly. But in terms of bad fashion, at one point, mostly Willow, but Willow is I just have her dressed like a clown, because she had a comical children's TV show woolly jumper with a big knitted flower on it, big orange hat that looks like it's been glued to her head, and some kind of police academy slapstick fashion. Really just like, it's amazing how well she looks despite how badly she dresses, is kind of the nicest thing I can say about Willow.
The worst part, of course, of that outfit specifically being her yellow opaque stockings. Just like, why?
Tepid. Buffy wears cargo pants.
Looks like she's pissing all the way down her legs.
But Buffy wears cargo pants. It looks like she's in a 90s kind of R&B music video. And it's just wearing an enormous parachute jacket. It looks like she's like bailed out of an airplane and inflating something to break her fall.
I actually thought it was really fashion forward. I thought
did not like it.
She could wear that today. It's like a big rain jacket kind of thing, but it's quite athleisure, you know?
Yeah. Do you know what it made me think of? It was an article I shared to you today about people who are paying thousands of dollars for digital fashion. So basically digital files or PSDs or whatever that you can edit onto photos of yourself.
Because they're more exclusive that way or something.
Yeah, they're more exclusive, and you can be like, oh, I bought this really expensive, like literally $9,000 for one of these, and I edited myself in wearing it at the Grand Canyon. And apparently they've sold out. I'm not sure how you sell out of a digital dress. Anyway, it looked like one of those, so maybe it was incredibly fashion forward.
I did quite like Angel's fashion in this episode. He is wearing just a plain black tank top at one point, which is just quite attractive. And there's another point at which he's just wearing like a jumper, a black jumper, and it's just like he's clearly just trying to be like, you know, at home supportive boyfriend.
I think if you're that old, you do learn to just wear things which are never going to go out of fashion.
Yeah,
just plain simple colors and shapes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
and yet Spike. So in terms of the death count for this episode, you already hit that hard.
Death count. There is the unknown vampire who was dusted by Buffy in the opening after barely surviving being dusted herself. Blair, who was one of the Watcher helpers, who was sired by Kralik and then dusted by Giles in a nice little underhand, like reverse staking maneuver he did, which I enjoyed. Hobson, who was drained and eaten by Kralik and Blair. And then finally Kralik himself, who burned after drinking holy water, which I felt he would have
felt on his mouth
with that, but also he was shown to burn really painfully, which I think is a certain audience satisfaction. Like, you want to see he didn't just dust, he died. And I think you want to see that. So yeah, it was a pretty bloody episode.
Yeah. What's your rating, Joel?
I would give this episode 9.4 outrageously long spoons out of 10.
Oh, what outrageously long spoons?
They feed, because he's tied up in the coffin, right?
That's what the friends used to poke the ugly naked man.
Naked ugly guy, I think, was the un-PC term. But no, they feed him his brain pills with an incredibly long spoon, and I find it very amusing.
Okay. Well, actually, I have a related. I in two ways I have a related rating. I'm going to give this episode 8.4 scissors out of 10.
Okay. Dark.
Yeah, I just thought it was good fun. I wasn't too impressed by it, but it was very solid, very good. Okay, well, that's it. Is it? That's it?
Yeah, that's it, Brian. Okay, so I'm going to lead us out now. Is that okay? Okay, so what are we going to be watching next week?
The Zeppo.
I'm so
excited.
excited.
I'm going to have to do so much reading in advance. I'm going to have to start my reading on like a Wednesday or Tuesday or some shit.
And we're going to be nice as Xander.
Nah.
Okay, super thanks. So thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Buffy Boys. We appreciate you, particularly if you've started listening recently. We appreciate you, not more, but in a different way. So if
in a worse way.
No, that's the opposite of what I was going for.
We're not like Jesus. You know that like horrible parable where where God is like, oh, those of you who work the whole day and people who work just a tiny bit of the day, you all get the same reward. I was like, no.
But isn't that what your parents say to you as well, if you have siblings, that they love you all equally? Maybe your parents didn't say that. Maybe your parents ranked you. I don't know.
My parents did not say that to us.
Some other kind of trauma. But yeah, if you enjoyed the episode, please let us know. If you would be so good as to leave us a review on iTunes or on your podcasting app, or even just to tweet us or email us and let us know what you thought about it. It really does mean a lot and really helps the engines take over here at buffyboys.com/headquarters. Speaking of Buffy Boys, which we are, if you'd like to follow us, you can either follow us at Buffy Boys on Twitter, or go to buffyboys.com where you'll find all our other socials media. And we really appreciate that. So otherwise, we will look forward to seeing you right here, same Buffy time, same Buffy channel next week on Buffy Boys.
That's the same one you did last time.
Who knows?
Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
See ya.